We're excited to be here, right? I think I speak for both of us. We're excited to be here representing Detroit, cheering on our Spartans and Wolverines that are facing the draft this weekend. There's Wolverines there too. Listen, you guys had a year off. If I can throw some shade,
That's right.
You had no draft candidates 2 years ago, so welcome back. Anyway, Casey Hurbis, Chief Marketing Officer of Rocket Central, which is he leads Detroit's premier in-house marketing agency and serving all businesses under that Rocket company portfolio. He probably leads one of Ad Age's best places to work since 2021, overseeing the marketing efforts for other successful businesses under that Rocket portfolio, including Rocket Pro TPO, Rocket Homes, Rocket Auto, Rocket Solar. Is there anything Rocket isn't doing?
There's a few more coming.
Okay. Helping to elevate these brands. Some of you have probably hopefully seen some of their Super Bowl commercials. Keegan-Michael Key, Jason Momoa, Tracy Morgan. Winning a couple of those won you back-to-back ad meter #1 spots. Fun fact, Pepsi and Doritos are the only other brands to have ever achieved that, so good rank for you guys. Casey's most proud of their sports partnerships that we're going to talk about today. Rocket Mortgage Classic in Detroit, and all the work you're doing with the NFL. Prior to joining Rocket Mortgage, Casey was in the automotive industry for 25 years, so making a jump out of that. He's responsible for bringing Fiat and Alfa Romeo back to the United States. So here we are today, though.
Yes.
6 years.
Yeah. 6 years on Monday, actually.
Congratulations. That's pretty big. For those of you who don't know, the average lifespan of a CMO is like 18 months.
Yeah, 2 years. My wife keeps reminding me of that.
Yeah. Let's hope this isn't the end for you.
Hopefully my CEO doesn't read Ad Age. That's all.
You're pushing boundaries, Casey.
Yeah.
I love that. But clearly he must be doing something right with that 6-year tenure. So we're excited to sort of dive into what you're doing and what's sort of helped you be so successful with sports marketing. Let's start with the Rocket story, though, for the people in the room who aren't as familiar. Let's talk about who Rocket is from a corporate standpoint, but also from an ethos and cultural standpoint.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sarah. And Sarah's also from Detroit, so it's awesome to be with a fellow Detroit colleague. And so a lot of people may not know the story of Rocket Company. So our founder, Dan Gilbert, Michigan State graduate, started the company 37 years ago. Literally, he started slinging mortgages in college. And he's like, this might be a cool little business to get into. And here we are 37 years later. A lot of people know Dan more for ownership of the Cleveland Cavaliers, who unfortunately lost to the Knicks last night, who are playing fantastic. And for drafting, getting, and losing LeBron again. But make no mistake, Dan is in Detroit, and he's an amazing, amazing human. And now we're an organization with over 100 plus companies in our portfolio. A lot of people know about Rocket and Rocket Mortgage. That's really primarily the public-facing brand. We'll talk a lot about those fintech brands that I have the pleasure of overseeing, but there's a lot more brands in the portfolio. Anyone that's into sneakers is always look around. We own StockX, Shinola, Zenith football helmets, Dictionary, Thesaurus.com, Gas Station TV, so on and so forth. Obviously, our sports Benzinga, which is a financial news service. And so it's really awesome to work at a company, and we'll talk a lot about Detroit and how Rocket is at the corner, really at the intersection of brains and muscle, as we talk about in Detroit, and being a big part of the rejuvenation of Detroit, which 365 days from now will be with brand innovators in Detroit for the 2024 NFL draft.
Let the cat out of the bag early.
Yeah, that's all right.
That's all right. Speaking of Detroit, so Rocket moved into Detroit in 2010. What has that meant to the brand and to the city?
Yeah, and so, our story, 11 years ago now, the company was about 1,700 team members. We're now about 30,000 team members. And the discussion was, all right, let's go build a campus, right? That's what every fintech or tech company was doing. And Dan was the only one to say, I think we need to go to this city. We need to go downtown Detroit. And so everybody but Dan was of mind that we should build a campus. And Dan said a couple things. One is, our city needs us. And quite frankly, 12 years ago, literally the lights were not on in the city. The city was going through bankruptcy, and it was a lot of trials and tribulation. Dan said, our city needs us. And it was very, and he was the only one that wanted to, quite frankly. And he said a couple things that, I was not in the room, but, have stuck with me, was our city needs us. He really saw a vision that the future generation of team members will want to be a part of something, right? And not go to a concrete jungle, but be part of a company that's woven into the fabric of the community. And he said something that I use, and I talk to my kids about this. So like, wouldn't it be pretty amazing if we look back one day and said we did something special, and if it doesn't work, at least we said we tried, because no one else was coming to the city at that time. And here we are 12 years later, and I encourage anyone to come to the city of Detroit. And it's a big story of like, what is happening in downtown Detroit. And, I just brought some images. I'm like the convention bureau. And, this is the largest construction project happening right next door to our office. It's the largest construction project in 50 years in the city of Detroit. This will be open in 2025. We thought we were going to have the draft in 25. The NFL wigged us at the last second. We'll be there next year. But it's absolutely amazing the amount of construction, and literally it's not knocking down buildings, but it's taking buildings that were closed and dormant for 40, 50 years. This building is actually opening next week. It's called the Book. And literally for 2 years, Dan spent millions and millions of dollars cleaning the outside of the building with 60, 70 years of just soot and grit. And here we are, this building is going to be opening next year, and it's just such a pleasure to be part of a company that, we're working hard to work on behalf of our clients, but also we have a for more than profit philosophy, and it's about taking care of the community that we're part of.
That's fantastic. I can vouch for that too, because I started my career working downtown Detroit for GM's ad agency more years ago than I'm willing to admit. It's been a long time. But to have seen the resurgence of the city and what Dan has been able to do has been just really incredible. Even in terms of how that relates to the sports community and the fans community, having brought the sports stadiums back downtown and the athletes there. So before we get into that, though, I want to talk a little bit about the evolution of the brand, right? So you guys started out as Quicken Loans. And since you've been downtown Detroit, you've had sort of a whole rebranding to Rocket. What's that look like?
Yeah, and so when Dan started the company, he actually sold it in 1999 to Intuit for $400 million, and they rebranded it to Quicken Loans, QuickBooks, and obviously underneath the Intuit brand. He bought the company back 3 years later for $60 million, so that was a good little return on investment. But now you had a national brand. Quite frankly, we licensed the name from Intuit, so we were only be able to use the Quicken name for mortgage. And so as we thought about diversifying our fintech portfolio, as you mentioned, we're going to, mortgage, homes, loans, auto, solar, personal finance, we had to go to a different brand. And also in 2016, we launched Rocket Mortgage. Rocket Mortgage is only a 6-year-old brand, and it launched in the Super Bowl in 16. And the thought was, all right, if we're going to launch this, end-to-end online from, application to origination, we should think about a different brand. So that's where Rocket was born. But we wanted to make sure that we started to literally downplay the Quicken name and devalue it while we rose the Rocket brand stature. So now, this is actually, I came in at step 2 of this process. And so for the last 6 years, we've been on this brand identity, tone, voice, and thinking about 5-10 years for the organization, all underneath the Rocket brand. We went public in 2020, and so now we're Rocket Companies, Rocket Mortgage. It's an ever-going evolution, and that's all part of our in-house agency, is managing all the brand identity, tone, voice, and feel for the Rocket brands.
I love that, addressing all facets of a consumer's sort of financial needs and well-being. Let's pivot. Let's talk about sports marketing. That's what these people are here to talk about. Let's talk a little bit about how Rocket decides which sports you want to get involved in and partnerships to venture into.
Yeah, and so, I just threw the old logo chart up. Sports is a big part of our go-to-market strategy. We're fortunate that we're an always-on advertiser. Now, granted, the last year and a half has been tough with the market, make no mistake, but we're fortunate still to be an always-on advertiser, and sports is about 30 to 40% of our investments, whether from traditional media, linear, all the way down to partnerships. Some of these were in place as I joined the organization 6 years ago. The big ones that really have come to life in the last few years is certainly a relationship with the PGA Tour. We'll talk about the Rocket Mortgage Classic, college football and basketball. We have partnerships with Learfield IMG, 25 schools. We've added HBCUs to that portfolio, and really the NFL. The NFL was. I think we had a couple dates a number of years ago before I joined, but as we started to look at the Rocket platform and where else do we want to play, and the NFL, and I'll tell that story, it was very interesting how the partnership even came to life. We've been a proud partner with the NFL now for 4 or 5 years. We're about to renew right now, and we're so excited that we've been at the forefront of working with the NFL to bring the draft to Detroit next year.
Tell us a little bit about your PGA partnership before we get into.
Yeah, so we were a partner with the PGA Tour for a number of years. When I joined the organization, we were partners with, it used to be the AT&T in DC with the Tiger Woods Foundation. And I was in the job for 3 weeks. I replaced our CMO, who became the CEO, and he said, hey, while you're out there, tell Jay Monahan that we're out. I'm like, what the fuck did you tell me we're out? Like, I just got here. Why didn't you tell him we're out? And, because we had this discussion with the PGA Tour, how to bring an event to Detroit. And quite honestly, in the number of years we were involved with the Tiger Woods Fund, Tiger was going through a lot of stuff. And we were no closer to get to the city, into the city of Detroit. So I got on the plane, I met with Commissioner Monahan, and I told him that we're out. We can't go longer, but we need to find a pathway to Detroit. About 6 months later, they asked us, said, can we come meet with you? And I said, the only reason you can come meet with us is if there is a path. And he said, we think we have one. So long story short, the idea of bringing the PGA Tour to Detroit was born again. This was a vision of Dan and Jay, our CEO, and that the PGA Tour, Michigan is still number 2, number 3 most golf courses per capita in the country, and the PGA Tour is very prominent in Metro Detroit. But guess what? In 2009, 10, 11, when the autos went through bankruptcy, everyone left, right? And so did the PGA Tour. So this was the first time that the PGA Tour has ever been in the city of Detroit. Of the 43 tour stops, only 2 are in a city. East Lake, which, if anyone knows that story, the Tour Championship in a very challenged area, and in the Rocket Mortgage Classic, which I encourage everyone, you will be my guest at the Rocket Mortgage Classic, June 26th, or 7th through July 2nd, at the Detroit Golf Club in the city of Detroit. A huge part of our mission is, the pandemic shown a very unfortunate spotlight across the country, but particularly in urban areas. Think about those early days of the pandemic. It became a realization that Detroit, this is unfucking believable, only 40% of Detroit residents had internet access in 2020. And so it was there. But you think about the spotlight that was shown all of a sudden when children didn't have the ability to do education. And telemedicine, like who knew, no one knew of telemedicine. And so you think about how the inability for humans to have internet access affects everybody from 5 to 85. And so we saw the Rocket Mortgage Classic is our mission to how can we help eradicate digital and bring digital inclusivity to the city of Detroit. I'm really proud. We just announced yesterday or 2 days ago that 40 is now up to 70%, and we're on a 5 to 7 year mission. But the Rocket Mortgage Classic is the cornerstone because we brought this tournament to Detroit to do 3 things. One is to shine a spotlight on our city, and there are major misperceptions about our city. They're still there. Every time I talk to somebody, it's there. One is to shine a spotlight on the city. 2 is to bring humans into our city to experience it. And 3, to do good for our community. And so that's something, this is like my baby. It's the thing I'm most proud of, and that, like I cry at the last time the putt drops every year because I know what goes into it. But and just to see the impact, I literally just had a creative call with my team at 7 a.m. this morning, where now 3 years later, when you watch the Rocket Mortgage Classic on Golf Channel and CBS, you're going to see now, like we're going to interview residents and kids and elderly that their lives have been positively impacted because of our efforts. So.
Yeah, I think that's such a beautiful story and really shines a light on the ability that partnerships like Rocket and PGA, Rocket and the NFL have to touch lives and to grow brands together well beyond just the metrics, right? Like as a CMO, your CFO, he wants to know, what have you done for me lately?
Yes.
But to be able to sit up here and tell stories like you just did about how not only what have you done for Rocket, but what have you done for the community?
Well, you're exactly right, Sarah. If I show the CFO the ROI on the Rocket Mortgage Classic, it's a loser. It's a 70% return. But what is immeasurable, there's one of the founding values of our organization, you're aware of these, called the ISMs. And one of the ISMs, there's 20 of them, and they're very simple things, and they are woven into everything in our culture. Dan Gilbert says, numbers and money don't lead, they follow. And this is, the PGA Tour is a great example. It's a 70-cent return on investment. But what isn't calculated in that investment is the spotlight that is shown in the city. Someone that comes and joins us from New York, LA, Chicago, and goes back and says, have you been to Detroit? Like just that interaction and have that's why I heard so much encourage media partners and agency partners to come in and spend the week with us, because I want you to go back to your communities and talk about what's happening in the city. That does not, as I tell our CFO, not everything lives in an Excel spreadsheet.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Doesn't go over very well, by the way. You know what that,
Well enough to
my
keep you
CFO
here.
calls that bullshit and puffery, but I own it.
It's worked so far. If you can't tell, we're passionate about Detroit, and if you guys haven't been, please, please, please come join us for any number of these events. Okay, pivoting. Let's talk NFL. Tell us about your partnership, how long that's been going on, and where you're at today with that.
Yeah, the NFL, that was a crazy one in that we love doing things, we call them first best only. Number of years ago, maybe if anyone remembers, that we did the $1 billion bracket with Warren Buffett in the NCAA tournament, and we were gonna do the Super Bowl squares with or without the NFL. And it was at this interesting time. It's now 5 years ago, and you think about 5 years ago, like, oh, gambling, and everyone's starting to look up, and like the DraftKings, FanDuels, what have you. So we called the NFL in Detroit and said, we're going to do this, but we want to do it with you. And quite honestly, the feedback was, a year ago we weren't ready, but we think we are. And so literally, we met in November. In 6 weeks, we penciled an OMP deal. And in the meantime, we drafted the rules. I got Barry Sanders on board, and we literally were shooting the commercial before I signed the deal with the NFL. And so we launched our NFL partnership with the Super Bowl squares, and that was a very successful program. And we're going to be pivoting a lot more of our pillars now to the draft. I love the conversation with sleep. If you think about the NFL draft and the number of lives that are changed over those 3 or 4 days, what's the first thing a lot of these young men do? Buy a car and a house for mom. Right? And so much like you want to put 2,500 people on a bed, we love to put 2,500 young men or their families into homes. And so there's a lot of that storytelling, but the last thing there, one of our big other passions is working with organizations that work with veterans and veteran homelessness. It's still a problem in this country. And I don't care what race, color, creed, sexual orientation, political beliefs you have. I don't know one human in this world that believes that a soldier that comes home and kisses the ground should also have to sleep on it. And so one of our things is we worked with the NFL, and Six for Service is addressing veteran homelessness and bringing stabilization to the 40, 50,000 veterans that are still homeless in our country.
That's awesome. What does the future of that partnership look like?
Yeah, so we're in the midst of figuring that out right now. I mean, much like Sleep Serta and the other brands that we saw here today. We also work with athletes, right? We've done spots with Larry in his last year with the Cardinals, and with Kyler and Aaron Donald, who's absolutely awesome. One of those things, like even though we may have a multi-year deal with a partnership, what I always stress to my team and our agency partners is we start with a blank slate every single year. It is not rinse and repeat. It is what is, learning. What are the learning opportunities? What was great? What was a miss? And how is the world evolving? And we talked about AI here for a second, and I think AI is just absolutely going to be disruptive, and we're in this very interesting time. Look already in the music industry where, holy shit, labels that are freaking out because all of a sudden Drake and whoever the collab is, like all of a sudden there's a Drake drop and it's all AI. I mean, in the NFL, the NFLPA has to think about that, right? As we think about name, image, and likeness. I think it's absolutely crazy that there wasn't one conference we went to that Meta wasn't the conversation all through, and now all of a sudden, like, as I asked my Meta team the other day, I'm like, when did we stop talking about metaverse? And it's all AI, but read what you read. But it's literally, Sarah, it's reimagining, but it's also looking at the pillars. I mean, the NFL is a 365, 24/7 juggernaut. And there are those inches that you can find. I thought it was really interesting to listen to the trainers and the club professionals and how you can go deep. And very much like we're not a brick and mortar. We sell a commodity, not a physical product. But we also think about how do you take something at the top of the funnel. We measure positive opinion consideration. That's a big part of our KPI. But then how do you activate it all the way down, whether it's having broker partners, real estate agents, what have you. And it's I have a full-time team on the NFL, and they're here with us this week, and so we're always reimagining how to get bigger and better every single year.
We can't wait to see where that goes.
Yeah.
Last point, which, like I said.
Sorry about that.
Okay. We're gonna watch your ads for a minute.
No, we're not.
You were so fucking excited you let this out of your mouth in the first 30 seconds
Oh.
up here. draft is coming to Detroit next
Yeah.
year. So what can we expect from Rocket?
I'll tell you a quick little story. 3 years ago, the NFL was kind of, as an OMP, to set up a meeting with Roger Goodell for me, one-on-one. And one of my unofficial roles in Detroit is I'm part of the Detroit Sports Commission. And in order to bring something like this to a community, it takes an absolute village. And it's not it's private and public sector. So here in Kansas City, we went to the dinner last night. We have the mayor's office, we have General Motors, Rocket, Carhartt, Little Caesars, DTE, health systems. I mean, it is a huge undertaking. And when I had the privilege of meeting Roger Goodell one-on-one, I pivoted. I did not talk about Rocket Mortgage. I did not talk about, and he's friends with Dan Gilbert, and we chatted about that for a hot second. But I pitched him on why Detroit. And at the time, Ford Motor Company, Little Caesars, and us, 3 OMPs, and they were in Cleveland at the time. There's a lot of parallels between Cleveland and Detroit and our stories and continued rejuvenation of our downtown areas. And I pitched them, and I mean, I don't know if it happened, but
It must have worked.
It must. Well, I mean, money does lead at times too. But long story short, and so we got named to the NFL draft in 2024. And it is absolutely exciting. It's going to be right in the downtown area, right outside of our offices. We're connecting everything in the city, so everything's going to be walkable. And fingers crossed. It's 45 and blowing rain here in Detroit today, and so it was 45 and blowing rain last April. And
But it
so,
was 82 weeks ago.
I'm a good Catholic boy, and so we'll be putting some extra time in at the church and praying for, and hopefully everyone. We're going to do a Brand Innovators event that Thursday. I committed to that. I secured the space this morning. And so Cadillac's in, Little Caesars is in, and so hopefully we'll have even more people join us in Detroit next April. But it's going to be
Hopefully you guys come.
Awesome.
It'd be a great first time to come to Detroit for you guys.
Yeah.
All right, listen, I want to end with a couple just rapid fire questions. These guys can get to know you a little better, okay? Let's go first car, current car.
Okay, first car, 1978 Datsun B210, paid $750. Couldn't go over 50 miles an hour without it, without the alignment shaking violently. So when I took a girl on a date, I made sure we only drove surface streets because it was too embarrassing to go on a highway. Current car, I'm a Detroit kid. Grandfather immigrated to this country, started working on the Chrysler line. I worked at Chrysler for 25 years, so I drive a Jeep.
Love that. All right, favorite athlete growing up?
Alan Trammell, shortstop, Detroit Tigers, Hall of Fame.
Didn't even take you a beat. All right, 4 NFL coaches or players, dead or alive, you want to have dinner with?
Vince Lombardi, my buddy Barry Sanders, which by the way, he's the slowest golfer. I realize why he could never hit a hole is because he literally takes 45 seconds in between every golf shot. It's the most painful experience in your life, but I love playing with him. Walter Payton. And this is going to absolutely pain me to say this, given my present company, but I would say Tom Brady.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go blue.
Yeah.
By the way, if you guys want to see a funny picture, I had the pleasure of meeting Calvin Johnson last night as well, and Casey also has golfed with him. Casey's not the tallest guy in the world. Calvin's a little tall, so Casey asked him to take a picture and said, but don't look so tall next to me, so it's a funny photo. Catch him later so you can see that. Okay, bucket list sporting event that you have been to and one that you want to go to.
I'm a sports freak. I'm 30 MLB stadiums into my tenure. Having kids has slowed that venture down. Two. One is I've had the pleasure of going to the Masters, which is the most pure sporting event you'll ever experience in your life. It is a must-do. And even though I'm not a big soccer fan, I had the privilege of going to the World Cup this past year in Doha and saw the Americans play. And just to be, and I've been to the Olympics back in '96, like backpacked. It was like my college excursion. But going to the World Cup was absolutely amazing. And a bucket list to go to, even though I'm not an auto fan, I think to see F1 in Monaco would probably be pretty freaking awesome. Or Vegas this year. I cannot freaking wait to see F1, blow by the wind right down Vegas Boulevard here in, I think, September, October. So that one is actually on a short list as well.
All right, once you get that done, it sounds like you've done it all. So you're out of ideas after that. All right, because we're in Kansas City, favorite barbecue?
I'm a Texas barbecue guy, big connoisseur. When you travel with me, sorry, I know.
You're making enemies real fast.
But when you travel with me, I'm a foodie, and I'm obsessed with always finding. And so we're gonna figure out a little window here. Any quick suggestions for us? Gates. I've been to Gates years ago. All right. Thank you. We have a window here, and
A couple votes.
my team hates traveling me because I literally schedule, like, and I'm a 2 a.m.er too, so there's nothing like a good taco or a slice. When we're in LA, like, I got all the taco stands laid out, and, you know, we're a 2 a.m. taco stand.
Tonight it's barbecue, 2 a.m.
Tonight's barbecue. Deal.
Last one.
Yes, ma'am.
Quick lesson that 51-year-old Casey would give 21-year-old Casey.
Thank you. It's something that, it's a quote, and if you have children, you can appreciate it. I go to their schools quite a bit. Actually, I'm going to Take Your Parents to Work Day here. That's why I get back. And it's a lesson that I talk to my interns every year, and it's a Warren Buffett quote. And it's, it takes 20 years to build your reputation. It takes you 20 years to build your reputation and 5 minutes to ruin it. And if you think about it, you might do things different in life. When he used that quote, I don't know what year that quote is from. I'm sure he didn't. I apply it to your use of everyone's use of social media, and what are you doing every single day? I use the analogy of, like, we're all painting our own canvas. I'm only halfway. I've been doing this for 30 years. I got another 10 or 12 to go, but I feel like I'm only halfway done with my canvas. And when I talk to about young people, I always say, is like, what are you doing every single day? You know, how are you painting your canvas? So think about it.
Love that. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sarah.
This was
Thank you.
fun.
Ciao.
Thank you, guys.